Welcome, symbols of psychological and spiritual growth. Everything in our world is coded in symbolism. A human being himself is a symbol, as you can see on the signs of the restroom doors and the pedestrian crossing sign. Symbols impact both our emotions and our behavior. For example, the symbol represented by the blaring sound of a fire alarm, and it is a symbol, may arouse panic and fear, while the meditative sound of a chime or the singing bowl may stimulate a sense of peace and calm. Symbols guide us throughout life. The arrow is an example, and if you dream about it or have an affinity to them at some point in your life, it means that you're going through change and may need some help with direction. Symbols communicate their message simply and easily. Just like the old adage, a picture tells 1,000 words, symbols give us direction in a straightforward and easy to understand way. The picture on the right says that the brain processes pictures 60 times faster than words. Some sources say it's even faster than that. Symbols are able to pass on their message through pictures in an uncomplicated way. A couple examples are the poison sign, the skull and crossbones, and we don't want to have anything to do with that kind of thing because we don't want to die. And then, of course, the no smoking sign. Symbols have the ability to capture and make complex concepts easy to understand. In the spiritual realm, they give concrete form to ideas about the nature of God or the Creator and the purpose of life. You can see this in the 15th century current era picture of God painted by Pittoni and the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel painted by Michelangelo. It has been said that symbol is the language of the soul. The same thing is true regarding the purpose of life. The picture on the left depicts one's wondering about the purpose of life, and the one on the right shows the illumination that is sought as the man opens the door. Because symbols don't use words, they can touch us at deeper levels than our ordinary thinking. They reach the level of our imagination, which is beyond the everyday concrete mind. Spiritual teachers say that imagination is the doorway to the divine, where we can transcend our minds and its everyday thinking to engage our intuition, which allows us to touch the realm of the spiritual. The intuitive and perceptive aspects of ourselves can cause a response that the everyday mind can't fathom. We can see into the heart of things. The intuition is the little voice inside that is shown by the picture on the right, where the little voice is whispering inside the mind. Psychology also touches this non-physical and ethereal realm because it deals with a person's mental health, our emotional and social well-being. Its key aspect is our self-awareness, and that's otherworldly or ethereal, and you might say spiritual. The self-awareness is not something that can be seen or found in our bodies, and it grows and develops as we do. You can see the picture of the kitty seeing himself as a lion, something we might be able to relate to, where we may see ourselves as being more capable than we are to others. Psychology has been represented in the past by the Greek capital letter psi, and it looks a bit like a pitchfork or the trident. The picture shows the devil holding his pitchfork. The psi symbol in psychology is from the notion that mental illness was thought of as the work of the devil, as the devil uses his pitchfork to stoke the fires of hell. Some say that the experience of untreated mental illness is a form of hell. Psychology has many symbols that signify complex ideas and theories, such as one's IQ or intelligence quotient. You can see the bell curve with the average intelligence being 100, and with the majority of people falling in the blue range under the curve, between 70 and 110. This is just one of psychology's symbols. Psychology's complex ideas and theories can mirror aspects of spirituality, not only in symbols, but also in their meaning. An example is the circle. In spirituality, it represents the unity of life. In psychology, it can express the sense of community, showing the range of one's group of friends and family. In the picture, the dark circle at the top is yourself. The next circle represents intimate relationships with family and friends, and that's your circle of friends. The larger circle represents more peripheral relationships of colleagues and neighbors. And the last circle signifies the larger society of which we are a part. The circle, being an ancient symbol of spirituality, signifying the oneness of life, is a perfect symbol for unity because all points on the circle are equal to any other in their distance to the center, illustrating equality and community. And the circle has no beginning or end. One of life's most mystifying and awe-inspiring aspects of spirituality is the notion of a supreme power that transcends all creation. Some may call this the ultimate reality, the infinite, divine, or others may call it God. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, one of the founders of the Theosophical Society in 1875, wrote The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888. The book describes the origin and the evolution of the universe and of humankind. In it, Blavatsky describes the circle as representing the unity from which all proceed and return. This is the highest universal principle or the ultimate reality, and Blavatsky offers us a definition of it. She defines it as the one life, the eternal, yet invisible, omnipresent, without beginning or end, unconscious yet absolute consciousness, unrealizable, the one self-existing reality. In The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky describes a series of symbols on a palm leaf manuscript that she could see clairvoyantly. It had black pages with white symbols. The first page was a plain white circle, and she wrote a further definition of God from Pascal, quoting Hermes Trismegistus, the legendary Hellenistic figure and the originator of Hermeticism. God is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. In Zen Buddhism, in the Japanese culture, the circular calligraphy symbol of the Enzo is drawn using only one brushstroke. This symbolizes the unity of life and can elicit a state of meditation when a person is painting it, because it represents the true nature of existence and enlightenment. In psychology, if you have a dream with a circle in it, it represents that you're going through a process of inner growth and spiritual evolution. The circle has been used throughout history to represent equality, and it's seen in the Knights of the Round Table, where no one knight sits at the head of the table to wield more power than others. And the Dalai Lama uses this theme in his circular council or circle of advisors. The circle representing unity encompasses the element of safety, as seen in the wagon trains that formed a circle for protection at night. Also, communities in Africa, like the Maasai, make protective boundaries around their huts to keep wild animals away. The circle protecting the people and their livestock. Psychology also uses the form of a circle to indicate personal boundaries about what is unacceptable in another's behavior toward us. Boundaries encircle the limits we find comfortable, and you can see the body bubble indicating the physical boundary. An example of a boundary violation is receiving a hug that is not appreciated. From the psychological point of view, the unity of the circle is also shown in the wedding ring, which represents undying love and commitment. Because the circle has no beginning or end, it symbolizes the everlasting love the couple has. Someone in love is happy and wants their partner to experience the happiness too, as if they were one. Wedding rings are thought to be from Egypt, where couples wore rings of leather or woven grass to represent the couple as a single unit. Egyptian pharaohs wore rings in the form of the Ouroboros, which is the head of a serpent forming a circle as it bites its tail. The Ouroboros represents many things in the eternal cycles of life, like birth, life, death, and rebirth. The pharaoh in Egypt was believed to be eternal and always watching over his people throughout the cycles of their lives. Another meaning of the Ouroboros pertains to personal transformation. Just like the snake sheds its skin as it outgrows it, we shed aspects of ourselves as we grow and change. It represents a new birth, both psychologically and spiritually. As we develop, just like the butterfly, we gain wisdom and transform ourselves to be the person we want to be. And the alchemical drawing on the left is derived from the Ouroboros, and the sun for the person's head represents the highest spirituality. To return to Blavatsky's description of the white symbols on a black background, she said they depicted the stages of manifestation in our world and everything in it. Starting with the plain white circle, it represents the one life before the universe came into being. The second page of the manuscript showed a point in the center of the circle. This is when manifestation begins or life thrills, as is spoken about in the poetic stanzas of Dijon in The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky's major work. The third page has the center point extending to a diameter drawn horizontally, representing the divine feminine. And the divine masculine is on the fourth page with a vertical diameter making a cross in the circle. This portrays the dualities of life by the two lines of the cross. Winter, summer, day, night, male, female, or good or bad. These dualities make our world known. The things we experience have a distinct feel to them because of these contrasts, and it makes life richer and fuller. The 5th page of Blavatsky's manuscript has the cross with no circle, representing physical manifestation on our earth. So moving back for a moment to Blavatsky's 4th page, the dualities in our life relate to the choices we may make in life. If we act in ways that are loving, we will be happier. If we act in negative ways or are grumpy a lot, if we're unkind, people will not respond to us very well and will likely be pretty unhappy. These results of our choices are examples of karma, the law that says every action has an equal but opposite reaction. What we do will come back to us in a corresponding way. The word karma comes from the Sanskrit root kr with a dot underneath the r, meaning action. It refers to the inevitable results of our actions, either good or bad, in this lifetime or in future lifetimes through reincarnation. This means that we are responsible for whatever happens to us in our lives. This is generally thought of as a spiritual theory, but it is embraced in psychology by our being accountable for what we do and taking responsibility for our actions or the logical consequences. So I love the boomerang because it so aptly represents that our actions will come back to us. The saying, what goes around comes around, is from what you sow, you reap. And that's the Bible, Galatians. It means that our behavior will stimulate similar behavior coming back from others. In psychology, this is called circular behavior, where one's actions arouse similar behavior in return. If you act negatively, it will circle back to you in some form, coming full circle. Then, unfortunately, it can become a vicious circle if a dispute continues. This also relates to the psychological concept of a self-fulfilling prophecy, or the Pygmalion effect. The slide says at the top, our actions toward others will impact their beliefs and actions back toward us, which will in turn reinforce our original, either accurate or faulty belief about ourselves. So an example of one that is faulty is the phrase, I can't do such and such. This makes us less confident and influences how others view us. Again, this works because of karma. Spiritual teachers instruct us to watch what we think. So we try not to poison our bodies with what we eat or drink. So we should not poison our minds with negative thinking. In addition to the cross within the circle, the duality of life is also present in the Tai Chi or the Tai Chi or yin-yang symbol. The black and white portions depict the opposites of day, night, male, female, selfish, unselfish. Just as day progresses into night, the curving shape of the edge between the light and dark areas of the symbol signifies that each side is continually cycling into the other. The little dots of the opposing colors will grow and change into their opposites, just as light and the daytime will become dark at night. Originally, it was thought that the yin-yang symbol was composed of two fish swimming in a bucket with each eye of the fish of the opposite color. As the eyes of the fish grow and change, it represents how life is continually cycling from one state to the next in a continuing balancing act. You can see that in the changes of our seasons. Additionally, the little dots of contrasting color illustrate how each side contains a little of the other in it. There is some bad in everything good, as well as some good in anything bad. As you can see, the slide of the sugary desserts may taste good, but they also have a lot of calories. And then on the other side, being laid off from your job may get you away from an ill-tempered boss or allow you to change your career. Ralph Waldo Emerson spoke of this in Compensation. Every sweet hath its sour, every evil its good. Shakespeare wrote of this in King Henry IV. There is some soul of goodness in things evil. Would men observantly distill it out? So whatever happens to you that seems bad has something positive in it. And this is represented in the Chinese wisdom, where the pictogram for crisis means both danger and opportunity. The danger is the threat to your life in some way, but the opportunity is the change point and the potential for positive growth and change, both spiritually and psychologically. An example is someone with a broken leg learning better computer skills or even how to knit. The wise aphorism of every cloud has a silver lining has the same message. Blavatsky teaches us in The Secret Doctrine that there's a purpose to the duality of good and evil. She writes, without the shadows of life, light would have no existence in our perceptions. If evil disappeared, good would disappear. This means that good and evil serve the purpose of highlighting the existing of the other. If evil didn't exist, good would not be apparent. It wouldn't be known. Good would simply be. So if you receive cruel treatment, you fully understand what it means to be shown kindness. Negative experiences give us the ability to understand why the positive is better. The opposites in life have a complementary nature that even out life's conditions and enhance everything we experience. You can see the two genders of male and female provide interest, pleasure, and a more complete life experience. And the changes of seasons bring variety to the environment. If one side of the polarity is eliminated, however, the other becomes destructive. Plants die if only exposed to sunshine. And we need rest along with our active lives, as well as alone time along with social activities. They round out like the circle all we go through. Psychology parallels the opposites of the yin-yang symbol in its techniques to help us deal with problems that come up. One technique is opposite action, doing exactly opposite what our emotions tell us to do. An example is being nice to someone we don't like. And it's not called two-faced like the caption says. It causes a healing to take place. Another opposite action for depression is engaging yourself with other people. You may not feel like you have the energy to go out, but it provides stimulation to lift your mood. Anxiety, too, can be relieved by the opposite of calm breathing or in engaging in the behavior you fear. The poet Edwin Markham understood the significance of the circle and demonstrated opposite action in his poem, The Circle of Life. He drew a circle to shut me out. Heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle and took him in. If we are excluded, we can draw a bigger circle and take in everyone inside it. This is through the attitude of love and forgiveness, opposite of what you might feel being left out. Again, opposite action. Dr. Marsha Linehan from the University of Washington in the 1990s developed dialectical behavioral therapy, and she coined a useful phrase that links psychology directly with spirituality, and it's called the wise mind, and it refers to our intuition and higher reasoning. And this is opposed to the emotion mind that comes from our defenses or strong emotional reactions to things. The wise mind extends beyond our emotion with rational thinking to allow wisdom and intuition to arise. And Dr. Marsha Linehan did us a wonderful service for therapists when she coined the wise mind, because counselors now have a term that doesn't merge us into the realm of religion, something we keep separate in our counseling, unless you are a religious counselor. The emotion mind can carry us away without reason, such as when we are angry. Emotions don't have a brain, they're just prompts to inform us how we feel or what we need to do. We need to use the wise mind to decide what our reactions will be. And I love this picture of the little girl shushing her angry self with her wise mind. We can use the emotion mind, though, when we are feeling positive about someone and give them a hug. But this still employs the wise mind. Now that was the emotion mind. We still employ the wise mind to determine if the setting is appropriate. All of this involves being aware of our emotions and what we're doing. And it's called mindfulness, which is the non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. And it's used both psychologically and spiritually. John Kabat-Zinn, the professor emeritus from the University of Massachusetts Medical School, created mindfulness-based stress reduction and taught mindfulness is paying attention on purpose to the present, non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment. So mindfulness is also a spiritual practice of witnessing. Now, witnessing is simply stepping back and observing. You watch yourself think your thoughts and feel your feelings, and you notice what you're doing with your body. You become aware of the entire situation you're in as you're walking around or doing anything. Now, to experience and to understand the part of you that is the witness, just take a minute and move your eyes away from your computer screen and just watch me or picture something in the room without focusing too much on any one thing in particular. Then, without moving your head, simply notice how you're sitting. Be aware of where your arms are and how your feet are placed. Next, widen your awareness to notice what is next to you. Then expand your awareness even more to take in the entire room. Then go further to be aware of the building you're in, maybe a house or an apartment building. And then widen your awareness even more to take in the neighborhood you're in. Then be aware of your entire city and increase that awareness to your state and even enlarge it to the entire United States. Go further and expand your awareness to take in the entire world. And finally, the entire solar system and even the universe. So coming back to your computer, the part of you that is aware of all of this and simply noticing everything around you is the witness. And it's really very easy. A beautiful poem from the ancient Hindu texts, the Upanishads, perfectly describe the witness. It says, two birds united always and known by the same name, closely cling to the same tree. One of them eats the sweet and sour fruits of life, and the other looks on without eating. The observer bird that doesn't experience the sweet and sour aspects of life is the witness. Witnessing is used in the psychological concept of emotional intelligence, coined by Daniel Goleman in 1995. And it describes our ability to understand, use, and manage our emotions. You can see the first component of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And this is the witness, what we just got in touch with, where we watch ourselves and monitor what we do. With that, we can empathize with others and put ourselves into their shoes to avoid hurting them or having an argument. Next, there is the motivation to work on ourselves. And this is needed because oftentimes our defenses would like us to fight. Defenses are useful when there's a serious threat and we're fleeing or trying to get under a table in an earthquake, but usually our defenses are too strong and unneeded with others. With emotional intelligence, we need to use the internal motivation to improve ourselves. Next, self-regulation keeps our emotions within bounds. Whether we get hot under the collar or stay as cool as a cucumber. This is important in reducing our own stress. Then lastly, we need to use the good social skills of listening and communicating effectively. These skills in psychology's emotional intelligence, with its heartfelt respect for others, reflect spirituality's oneness of life. We can engage our hearts in our thinking and treat others in ways that we would want to be treated, like the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Unity is also demonstrated in psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg's theory on moral development. He describes 3 stages. Firstly, in the pre-conventional stage, People follow society's rules out of fear of punishment. We don't want to pay for a traffic ticket, so we learn to obey the traffic laws. The next stage of conventional behavior shows that as we develop, we follow rules and structures to maintain the ones already in place. We don't want to have our homes robbed, so we appreciate the laws we have. Then lastly, the third stage of post-conventional marks rule following from a genuine concern for the welfare of others and society in general. And this shows caring for others and the unity of life. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, wrote about a similar development within a human being called a process of individuation. And this is a general term referring to our growing up and developing a clear sense of self that's separate from our parents and what society expects of us. We recognize our identity and the uniqueness of our nature. Carl Jung, however, developed it further. He said that the opposites of the yin-yang symbol, or the cross within the circle, are within us, all of these opposites, and they make a myriad of variations in each person's personality, which distinguishes us from each other. We may be carefree or concerned, extroverted or introverted, and we may display these at various times depending on our interests or the groups we are with. Carl Jung emphasizes that individuation is the process of integrating all the opposites within ourselves, such as the feminine qualities, the anima, as well as the masculine attributes, the animus. We learn to value all our qualities. Jung described that it is important to integrate all these variations, such as good or bad, because otherwise they may be hidden in the shadow. Now, the shadow consists of qualities within us that we don't like or don't want to admit we have. They are weaknesses within us that we'd like to forget about, because we generally define ourselves with how we act most of the time, and that's our persona, or how we present ourselves to the world. Negative qualities that don't show up very often, but that are still a part of us, can easily be kept in the shadow, or our unconscious. That is, aspects of ourselves we are not fully conscious of, and we can forget about them. A quote from Confucius illustrates the shadow. He says, "When you see a man of worth, think of how you may emulate him. When you see a man who is unworthy, examine your own character." He says that when we see someone who is unworthy, that is, if we think negatively of him, we must examine ourselves and our own character to see that we are noticing aspects of ourselves in him. Our faults are easy to see in another, then convenient for us to deny in ourselves. And this is where our work is, what we need to focus on for our growth. This denial is a major defense mechanism which enlivens the shadow. It is simply not acknowledging or seeing a trait within ourselves. Not me, I don't do that. So that's denial. It allows us, unfortunately, to have a false sense of our own purity. Another way to see the shadow is to look at the lies we tell. White lies or lies allow us to hide something we don't want exposed, and they get us off the hook in some way, probably coming from a sense of inadequacy or self-doubt. Still, another common defense mechanism that keeps the shadow alive is blame. This allows us to shift the responsibility for our behavior onto someone else or to the circumstances we're in. It's usually based in fear, where we want to avoid the consequences for our actions. It's his fault, or you started it. This pattern may have begun in childhood when you blamed your siblings so you wouldn't get into trouble. And it allows us to avoid facing our shadow. And it takes a lot of courage really to look at our shadow and see all these negative qualities. There is a Native American expression that demonstrates this well, and it says, never point your finger at someone outside your circle because you have 3 fingers pointing back to yourself. The 3 fingers pointing back puts the responsibility for our behavior right where it should be. Another from the South, Native Americans, and that's who live where Wisconsin now is. Always look at your own moccasin tracks first before you speak of another's faults. So I'd like to tell a short story that illustrates how easy it is to blame others for what we have done. And it's called The Missing Axe, and it's from China. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who worked in the fields. One day he misplaced his axe, and he was sure someone had stolen it. He suspected his neighbor's son. The boy walked like a thief, talked like a thief, and looked like a thief. And he thought of ways he could get it back. The following day, the man found his axe while he was working at the back of his field. And the next time he saw his neighbor's son, the boy walked, talked, and looked like any other child. So you can see how easy it is to blame others. A fourth psychological mechanism that protects the shadow is projection. And this is thinking someone feels a certain way or has a particular attitude or is acting in a particular way when it's only a conclusion we draw in our own minds. This cartoon shows projection, and the little guy thinks, I know you're thinking terrible things about me. And he gets mad because he feels judged. Then we learn that the other was only thinking about eating a piece of pie. Projection means we see things not as they are, but as we are. With projection, we attribute our own negative thoughts, feelings, or motives onto another person. For example, we may feel inadequate around someone and project onto them that they're looking down on us. And we ignore that it comes from ourselves, probably from self-doubt. And the person may not be judging us at all. And if they truly are, we should ignore them because we are all equal. Just like the pawn is equal to the queen. And the pawn can take out the queen in chess. Or another example is the client who is resentful and bitter and puts this on her therapist. So that's projection. Lastly, you may think that someone is being argumentative when it's coming from you. And that kind of interaction can go back and forth with one argumentative or blaming statement after the other, as seen in the tangled up arms in the picture. Carl Jung said, "We always see our own unavowed mistakes in our opponent. We put things on others and we don't want to see in ourselves." So every time you think something negative about someone, look to see if you have that quality in yourself. Being aware of the shadow and integrating it is a process called assimilation by Carl Jung. And he said, "I would rather be whole than good." He would rather see all his qualities, good and bad, than to have only a limited view of himself as being good. Then he said he can face his shortcomings and transform them. According to Jung, because of this inner work and the maturing that comes, he said assimilation completes the process of individuation. Finally, the most important thing to keep in mind about a shadow quality is that it makes a contribution when it is assimilated, because inherent in all negative qualities are aspects that are positive. The positives just need to be brought out. This is depicted by the white dot in the black section of the yin-yang symbol. So let me give you an example. Suppose I am rude. The positive aspect of rudeness is frankness or candor. It cuts to the heart of things. I may say something that's true, but I do it in an undiplomatic, rude way. So the contribution is honesty. And we learn from psychology that the key to changing something negative in us is to transform it into its opposite positive feeling or behavior. So the opposite positive of rudeness is diplomacy or tact. Just as Isaac Newton said, tact is the art of making a point without making an enemy. So what we want or need to say that may have been rude should be done with thoughtfulness and sensitivity, the opposite positive of rudeness. Another example is being critical of others in your mind or by talking negatively about them to someone else. The positive in this is the attention to detail and the ability to analyze what is wrong. The opposite positive for this would be for you to examine yourself and analyze what you need to do to change. Then with opposite action from dialectical behavioral therapy, the technique I mentioned before, opposite action, then with the person we were originally criticizing, we can pay them a compliment. This DBT skill of opposite action is demonstrated in the following story called Old Joe and the Carpenter, and it's from the United States. Old Joe lived out in the countryside all by himself. His best friend was his closest neighbor. Each of them lived alone since their wives had died and their children had left home. One day they had a serious disagreement about a stray calf that had wandered away, and each one claimed it as his own. Now, both Old Joe and his neighbor normally got along quite well, so they were really hurt not to be believed by the other. They both went home and stayed inside their houses. 2 weeks passed without a word between them. Suddenly, old Joe heard a knock on his door, and as he answered, he saw a nice young man with a toolbox in his hands. And he called himself a traveling carpenter and asked Joe if he had any work for him to do. Old Joe answered and said he wanted to build a fence at the end of his property so he couldn't see his neighbor. And he was particularly mad because his neighbor had diverted an old creek bed so that it went along the property line. And old Joe was convinced he had done it out of spite. And this is projection, by the way. So the carpenter set out to do the work. At the end of the day, old Joe went to look at the fence, and he was speechless. It wasn't a fence at all, but a beautiful footbridge that went from one side of the creek to the other. Just then, old Joe's neighbor came out of his house, crossed the bridge, and held his hand out to Joe and said, "I'm so sorry about the misunderstanding, Joe. The calf is yours. I just want to be friends." Old Joe replied in kind, "I want to be friends too. You keep the calf." Then they looked at each other and at the carpenter and said they could come up with more work for him to do. But the carpenter smiled and said, "I like to stay, but I can't because I have more bridges to build." So you can see the opposite action shown by the carpenter building the footbridge and the forgiveness that was brought about. Opposite action is encouraged by spiritual teachers who say we must reach out to people and heal relationships. The Buddha taught us in the Dhammapada, the only way you can become free is to love those who hate you. To further this point, spiritual teachers encourage us to do things for others. And in psychology, we know this is one of the best ways to feel better. The 14th Dalai Lama wrote about this in the Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World. And he said, adversity, illness, and death are real and inevitable. To heal your own suffering, turn away from your self-regard to wipe the tears from the eyes of another. This is the true secret to joy. The Dalai Lama also said that altruism is the best source of happiness. There is no doubt about that. This creates a feeling of gladness inside us. So in closing, this point is aptly said by Rumi, the Persian poet and Sufi master. When you do things from your soul, you feel a river of joy moving inside you. So hopefully these similarities of psychology and spirituality, showing us how we can grow and develop ourselves, will inspire you on your own spiritual path. Thank you.